The planet of Zorelia was burning. Massive plasma strikes lit up the sky like falling stars. Once peaceful cities now shook with explosions. Towering spires crumbled, and the screams of both soldiers and civilians filled the air. Nobody had expected this war. Not even the great alien queen who ruled from the icy halls of the Crystal Citadel. Inside the deep chamber of the palace, Queen Lyrea stood still. Her silver dress shimmered like ice, and her crown glowed faintly in the blue torchlight. But her eyes were cold, focused, and full of something darker than fear-regret. Around her, advisors shouted, begging her to flee, but she remained silent. The reason for her silence stood quietly behind her. A young girl, no older than 17 in human years, looked up at the queen. She had her mother's white hair, and the same sharp blue eyes, but there was something softer in her gaze, something untrained. She wore no armor, no crown. Only a simple cloak over her fragile frame. She was the queen's daughter, Princess Varela, but no one in the palace treated her like one. She had been ignored her whole life. Varela had lived in the cold shadows of her mother's power. She was the daughter the queen never introduced. To visitors, the child who was too soft, too gentle, too different. She wasn't made for war. She barely understood court politics. She only read, painted, and walked the gardens alone. And now, with the war crashing down around them, she stood still, like a forgotten ghost among royal chaos. Suddenly, a deep explosion shook the walls. One of the palace towers collapsed outside the window. Panic spread fast. The queen turned. Her generals demanded decisions. But instead of preparing for battle or ordering a final stand, the queen gave a strange command. "Call the human," she said. The room froze. Everyone knew who she meant. A single human, stranded on their world weeks ago, an outsider. A man who fixed broken machines and lived quietly in the workers' district. He had saved an engineer's life once, nothing more. He had no weapons, no army, no claim to nobility. Yet the queen had secretly watched him. And now, in the middle of a war, she was calling for him. Moments later, the human arrived. Dust still clung to his jacket. His face was young, alert, confused. He walked carefully past royal guards, his eyes full of questions. He had no idea what was happening or why the most powerful woman on the planet had summoned him. "Queen Lyrea, step forward. You know machines, you know survival. And most of all, you know kindness," she said, her voice like winter wind. "I give you a task no soldier can do. You must take her." She pointed to Varela, the human's brows furrowed. "Take her where? Far from this war. Keep her alive. She is my daughter, and she will die here if she stays." The room erupted in protest. Advisors shouted. Guards stepped forward. But the queen raised one hand, and silence fell. "Have ignored her for too long," she whispered. "I gave everything to power. But now I give her to something I never understood. Compassion." The human looked at Varela. She looked back, confused and scared. Neither of them spoke. Outside, another explosion shook the air. That was the moment everything changed. One human, one neglected alien girl, and a dying queen who made the most shocking decision of her reign. And so, under the burning sky, the human took the alien princess's hand, and they ran. The air outside the palace was thick with smoke. Blazing red lights flashed from the sky as enemy warships hovered like hungry beasts above the city. Buildings cracked and fell. Screams echoed through the ruins. But the human didn't stop running. His hand gripped the alien girls tightly, guiding her through narrow alleys and broken streets. She struggled to keep up. Her shoes, made for royal halls, not survival, slipped on cracked ground. Her breath came in short gasps, and her heart pounded. But she didn't let go. They ran past burning towers and collapsed roads. He knew the city better than she did. He had worked in its deepest levels, fixing broken energy pipes, broken transport lifts, and broken people. Now he was doing the same thing again. Only this time, what he was trying to save was not a machine. It was a life. She had never been touched by someone outside the palace before. His hand felt rough and warm. Her world had always been cold, made of metal and silence. But his grip felt real, human. And when she looked at his face, she saw something strange. He was scared, yes, but not for himself. For her, they ducked into a shattered building. Dust rained from the ceiling. He let go of her hand and motioned for her to stay low. She obeyed, sitting behind a broken wall while he looked outside. "I don't even know your name," he said, panting. "Varela," she replied softly. "I'm Cade," he said, offering a quick smile. "And I guess I'm your bodyguard now." She nodded, unsure what to say. Outside, loud footsteps echoed, enemy soldiers scanning the streets. They had reptilian armor and glowing red eyes. The enemy was not just trying to win. They were trying to erase every trace of the Queen's bloodline. Cade pulled a metal rod from his belt, a small tool. Not a weapon, but his hands were steady. He watched the shadows pass by. Then silence. When he turned back to her, he noticed how different she looked from anyone he'd ever met. Her skin shimmered slightly in the dim light, like frost under moonlight. Her eyes were wide, watching him. She wasn't just afraid. She was trying to understand him. "Why did your mother choose me?" he asked. She hesitated. "I don't know. She never talked to me much. She never held me. But now she trusts you more than her own court." Cade leaned against the wall. "That makes two of us confused then." They stayed there for hours, hiding as patrols moved past. Cade made small maps in the dust, planning their next move. He needed to get her out of the city. There were hidden tunnels beneath the old worker zones. He had used them before. But reaching them would not be easy. When night fell, the air turned colder. The fires still burned, but the skies had grown quiet. For now, Varela sat beside him, hugging her knees. "You're different from what they told us about humans," she said. "Let me guess," he replied. "Loud, violent, uncivilized." She nodded. "But you saved me." "I didn't plan on it," Cade said, looking at her with a tired smile. "But sometimes life throws something unexpected at you." She looked down. "You could have said no." "I know," he said simply. "But I didn't." A soft silence filled the room. Then, a low rumble in the distance. Varela tensed. "They're using seismic drones. They'll find us." Cade stood quickly. "Then we move." They slipped out into the back alley and began to move again, staying in the shadows. Varela tried to stay strong, but her steps slowed. Her dress was torn, her feet scraped. Cade noticed and stopped. Without a word, he bent down, gesturing for her to climb on his back. She stared. "You would carry me?" "We don't have time to argue," he said. She climbed onto his back. His grip tightened, and he began to run. The moment was strange. She was royalty. He was a stranger. But now she was clinging to him like her life depended on it, and maybe it did. The night grew darker. But as they disappeared into the ruins of the old city, something changed inside both of them. One had lived with power but never felt love. The other had been powerless, but chose to protect. And deep below the ground, something ancient waited. Something that would test both of them in ways neither could imagine. The tunnels beneath Cerelia were older than the palace above. Built during a forgotten age, they twisted like roots under the city. No light touched them, except for the dim glow of broken wires and leaking crystals. As Cade stepped carefully through the darkness, the only sound was his boots echoing against wet stone. Varela walked behind him now, her fingers brushing the cold walls for balance. She was tired, but she said nothing. Her royal life had never prepared her for this kind of world. Each step took her farther from everything she'd ever known. Yet, strangely, she didn't feel lost. She was with him. Cade stopped at a broken junction and pulled out a handheld scanner from his satchel. The screen flickered. "These tunnels go deeper, toward the outer districts," he said. "If we make it past Sector 9, I can contact someone. An old friend who still owes me a favor." Varela looked up. "You trust him?" Cade gave a half-smile. "I don't trust anyone, but I know who runs. And who stands when things fall apart." They continued through the winding corridors. Slime dripped from the ceiling. Mechanical spiders skittered in the dark. Varela flinched once, but Cade reached back and grabbed her hand. "Stay close." These lower systems were abandoned after the old wars, but not everything down here died. After a while, the tunnels opened into a wide chamber, an ancient transport station. Vines crawled across metal walls. A rusted rail system sat in silence, its lights flickering dimly. But something about the place felt wrong. Cade raised his hand. "Wait." Varela froze. Then they heard it. A slow dragging sound, like metal scraping stone. From the far end of the chamber, something moved. A tall shape stepped into the faint light. It was not a soldier. It was not human. Its body was half machine, half organic, an ancient protector unit that had lost its purpose long ago. Its single eye glowed red, flickering with instability. It raised its arm, and an energy spike hissed to life. It had detected intruders. Cade grabbed Varela and shoved her behind a pillar. "Don't move," he whispered, but the old machine had already locked onto them. It charged. Cade rolled to the side and threw his metal rod. It sparked against the robot's armor, but barely slowed it. The thing moved fast, its joints grinding. It screamed like a broken speaker. Cade ducked under a swipe and pulled a wire from the floor, jamming it into the unit's back panel. Electricity sparked. The robot paused, but only for a second. It turned toward Varela. She stood frozen, her back against the wall. The eye of the machine locked on her, and it raised its spike. Then she lifted her hand. There was a sound like cracking ice, and the air shimmered. A burst of glowing frost shot from her palm and hit the machine square in the chest. The robot's body froze in place, its joints turning white. With a loud creak, it collapsed to the floor, frozen solid. Cade stared, shocked. What was that?" Varela looked down at her hand, stunned. "I don't know. I didn't mean to." "You never used a weapon before?" "I never thought I had one." They stood in silence. The frozen wreck still steamed. Cade stepped closer. "Looks like you've got something special after all." She looked up at him. "My mother always said I was too weak." Maybe she was wrong. They moved quickly after that, knowing more dangers might come, but something between them had changed. She was no longer just someone to protect. She had power unknown, uncontrolled, but real. As they reached the next tunnel, Cade paused. "You saved me back there." She smiled, just a little. "You saved me first." They walked on, but far above them, in the remains of the palace, someone else had noticed Varela's escape. A shadow watched the frozen machine's last signal. And this shadow, tall, cloaked, wearing the enemy symbol, turned to his soldiers. "Find the girl," he said. "She is no longer useless." The next tunnel was narrow and full of dust. Pipes ran along the ceiling like metal snakes, some dripping cold mist onto their heads. Varela walked beside Cade now, her steps more confident. She hadn't spoken much since she froze the machine, neither had he. But both were thinking the same thing. What else was she capable of? Cade finally broke the silence. "What you did back there, that wasn't normal. That wasn't tech." Varela looked at him, confused. "I never trained in weapons. I didn't even know I could do that." "It wasn't a weapon," Cade said. "It came from you, your body, your mind. That was power." She looked down at her hands. "Maybe." That's why my mother always kept me away from the court. Maybe she was afraid. They turned a corner and found a rusted door. Cade knocked 3 times, then kicked it once. The sound echoed strangely. After a moment, the door creaked open. A short alien woman with glowing eyes peered out. She had gray skin and wore a heavy tool belt. "You're supposed to be dead," she said to Cade. "Good to see you too, Marek," he replied. She looked at Varela. "And who's the Ice Princess?" "She's the reason I'm not dead." Cade said, "We need a way off this planet. Quiet and fast." Marek snorted. "That'll cost you." Cade pulled out a small metal disc from his pocket. "Still have this?" Marek's eyes widened. "You kept the Queen's tech key?" "I was saving it for a rainy day," he said. "Well, it's raining plasma now." She let them in. The hideout was small, full of old machines and stacked crates. Lights buzzed dimly overhead. Varela looked around in wonder. She had never been in a place like this, gritty, messy, alive. Marek began working on her console. "I've got a skiff in the old freight tunnels. But they're crawling with enemy scouts. And they're not looking for soldiers anymore. They're looking for her." "They know she escaped," Cade said. "They must have picked up the frozen robot signal." "Then you better move fast," Marek said. "You've got maybe 2 hours before they block the tunnel." Varela touched Cade's arm. "Why are they after me now? I was nothing to them before." "Maybe," Cade said. "But now they know what you are. Whatever your mother hid, it's waking up inside you." Suddenly, a loud alarm blared through the hideout. "They found us!" Marek shouted. Before Cade could speak, the wall exploded. Soldiers in red armor stormed in, weapons drawn. Cade pulled Varela behind a crate and fired Marek's shock blaster. Sparks flew, knocking 2 enemies back. But more were coming. Varela crouched beside him, her hands trembled. "I don't know if I can do it again." "You don't have to know," Cade said. "Just feel it." She closed her eyes. The air around her chilled. Frost crept along the ground. Then, like a wave, a burst of icy wind exploded from her body, freezing the floor and trapping the attackers in thick crystal. The room went silent. Cade stared at her again, breathless. "You're getting stronger." "I don't know how to stop it," she whispered. Marek peeked from behind her workbench. "That was insane, but it bought you time. Go now." Cade grabbed Varela's hand and they ran out the back. The escape tunnel was narrow and full of smoke. Sirens wailed behind them. As they reached the old transport track, Marek's voice buzzed through Cade's earpiece. "There's something else." Before the palace fell, a message was sent to the enemy mothership. From inside. From who? Cade asked, running. Marek hesitated. "Someone close to the Queen, maybe her general, or worse." Cade felt his chest tighten. "She was betrayed. They want the girl alive," Marek added. "But not safe." Cade looked at Varela as they ran. She didn't know. Not yet. He didn't have time to explain. The skiff was waiting in a docking station ahead. A small, battered ship, but fast. Cade threw open the hatch, pulled her inside, and fired the engines. As the ship lifted off, Varela sat in the co-pilot seat, breathing hard. Why would my mother trust someone if she knew there was betrayal? She asked. Cade didn't answer, because deep down, he was beginning to fear something else. Maybe the Queen had known exactly what was coming, and maybe giving Varela to a human wasn't a gift. Maybe it was a warning. The skiff shot through the broken sky of Zorelia, weaving between smoking towers and shattered starships. Red warning lights flashed on the control panel, but Cade kept his focus on the path ahead. Behind them, enemy fighters roared in pursuit, dropping pulses of energy that shook the ship with every near hit. Varela sat beside him, her eyes wide with fear. "They're getting closer." "I know," Cade said, tightening his grip on the controls. "But they're not faster." The skiff dove through the clouds and slipped into a narrow canyon where the rocky walls helped hide them from sensors. The ship rattled violently, but the enemy fighters couldn't follow. One clipped a ledge and exploded behind them, lighting the canyon in blue fire. They flew in silence after that. The stars returned, and the sky opened above them. But the silence wasn't peaceful. Varela looked at Cade. "I need to know the truth. My mother gave me to you like I was some object, but she never looked at me like this before. What changed?" Cade didn't answer right away. He checked the map, then finally said, "Maybe she knew the palace would fall. Maybe she realized too late what she had ignored her whole life." "She was cold," Varela said softly. "She barely spoke to me, even when I was small. The others whispered that I was different, that she didn't want me in public." Cade glanced at her. "You are different, but not in a bad way." She stared at her hands. "This power inside me. I don't understand it. It's growing, and I'm scared of it." Cade nodded slowly. "You froze a war machine. You saved us twice. That's not weakness. That's something rare. But why?" "Would she hide it?" Varela asked. "Why never train me?" Cade pulled the skiff into a quiet orbit above a dead moon. The stars sparkled in the distance. Maybe because she was afraid of what would happen if others found out. Then the ship's console beeped. A transmission was coming through. Cade stared at the screen. It was encrypted with a royal signature, Queen Lyraea's personal code. He pressed play. The hologram flickered to life. Queen Lyraea's face appeared, cold and regal. But her voice was softer than before. "If you're seeing this," she said, "then I am either dead or worse. My enemies now walk the palace I once ruled, and my daughter is in danger." Varela leaned closer. "I was never a good mother," the queen admitted. "But I was a careful ruler." Varela was born different. The ancient blood runs through her veins. The frost core, the power of our first ancestors, sleeps inside her. Cade's eyes widened. "She was not ready," the queen continued. "I tried to delay it, to hide her from politics and war. But the frost core has awakened, and with it, the prophecy." Varela whispered, "What prophecy?" "The queen's." Voice dropped lower. "They will hunt her, not to kill her, but to use her. The core obeys only the bloodline. And the one who controls Varela controls the next empire." The message ended. Silence filled the ship. Cade leaned back in his chair, his face pale. "So that's why they want you. You're not just the queen's daughter. You're a key to power." Varela's voice shook. "Then I'm not safe anywhere." "You're safe with me," Cade said quietly. "I promise." She looked at him, and for the first time, her eyes filled with tears. "I don't want to be a weapon," she whispered. "I just want to be someone." Cade gently reached out and took her hand. "Then we make that choice. Not them, us." Suddenly, the sensors flared again. A massive ship had just entered the system, dark, sharp, and monstrous. It didn't fly like the others, it moved like a predator. And on its hull was a single symbol burned deep into the steel. The mark of the betrayer general, the one who had sold the palace from within. "They found us," Cade said. Varela stood slowly. "Then let's stop running." Cade looked at her, surprised. She wasn't the same fragile girl from the palace anymore. She stood tall, her hair glowing in the ship's light, and her blue eyes no longer afraid. Somewhere deep inside, the frost core pulsed with energy. And for the first time, it answered her call. The enemy ship hovered like a dark mountain in space. Its jagged frame blocked the stars, casting a shadow over the moon where Cade's skiff had landed. Red lights blinked across its surface, and inside its heart, soldiers prepared for capture, not to destroy Varela, but to take her alive. Inside the skiff, Cade rushed to power down all systems. He cloaked the ship using an old shield trick Marek had taught him. It wouldn't hold forever, but it might buy them time. Varela sat in silence, her eyes closed. Her breathing was slow. Her hands rested on her knees. The frost core inside her pulsed like a heartbeat in her chest. Cold wind brushed her skin, even though the air was still. Cade crouched next to her. "What are you doing?" "I'm trying." "To listen," she whispered. "To the core." He frowned. "Can it talk?" "Not with words. But it shows me things, feelings, memories." She opened her eyes. "It's older than the Queen, older than our palace. It remembers a time when our people were not rulers, but slaves." Cade leaned back. "Slaves? We were born with this power, but others feared it, so they trapped us. They used us to power ships, weapons, even cities. The frost core was split into pieces and hidden. I carry the last one. That's why I was hidden my whole life." Outside, a scanning beam from the enemy ship swept over the moon. The light glowed red through the skiff's windows. Cade held his breath. If the cloak flickered, they'd be found instantly. Varela stood. "They won't stop until they control it again." Cade shook his head. "Then we fight." "With what?" "We're alone." "We're not weak," Cade said. "Not you, and not me. I might not have powers, but I've survived worse than this. And I'm not letting them take you." She looked at him, her eyes softening. "Why are you doing this?" "Because I believe." "You were given to me for a reason," he said. "Not as a gift, but as a choice, and I choose to protect you." She stepped closer. "Then let's choose to stop hiding." They opened the hatch of the skiff and stepped out into the cold wind. Of the moon's surface, the enemy ship's ramp lowered, and figures in red armor descended. At the front was the betrayer general, his long cloak dragging behind him. His eyes were cold, and a scar ran down the side of his metal-plated face. He raised a hand. "Princess." "Varela, come peacefully. You are not ready to fight me." She stepped forward. "I don't need to be ready. I only need to be sure." The general laughed. "Your mother wasted your power. She feared it. I will train it. Control it." "No." Varela said. "You only want to control me." He raised his weapon. "Then I'll break you first." The soldiers rushed forward. Cade fired his blaster, taking down two before rolling into cover. The general moved like lightning, striking at Varela with his staff. She dodged, barely keeping balance. Then she raised her hand. Ice shot from her palm, sharp like blades, but the general blocked it with a force shield. He struck again, this time harder. She fell backward. Her head hit the ground. Cade screamed her name and ran to her, but soldiers blocked him. Varela's vision blurred. Her ears rang. Blood touched her lip. She could feel the core trembling. And then something snapped. The wind stopped. Time slowed. She stood up. Her eyes glowed bright blue. Her hair lifted in the air as frost circled around her body. The core had awakened completely. The soldiers froze in fear. The general's voice shook. "No, not now." She lifted both hands. A storm exploded from her body. Snow, ice, and freezing wind tore across the moon. It struck the soldiers, trapping them in blocks of frozen crystal. The general tried to escape, but a shard of ice pierced through his armor, forcing him to the ground. Cade watched, shielding his eyes. He had never seen anything so terrifying. Or so beautiful. Varela walked toward the general. "You were wrong. I don't need to be trained by fear. I have something stronger." He gasped. "What?" "Someone who believes in me." She raised her hand again. But before she could finish him, her body shook. The power was too much. Cade ran to her and caught her just before she collapsed. "Easy," he said. "You don't have to do it alone." She looked at him, her energy fading. "It's too strong." "No," he said, holding her close. "It's just beginning." Above them, the enemy ship began to fall back. The frozen storm had scared them. They weren't ready for what she had become. But something else was coming, something older, something that had waited for the frost core to awaken. And, in the final part, it would reveal itself. The wind had stopped, but the silence that followed was not peaceful. The ground was frozen in a wide circle around Varela and Cade. Enemy soldiers lay trapped in ice, and the betrayer general had vanished, his body taken away by retreating drones. But something strange was happening now. The frost core was pulsing louder than before, not in her chest, but from below the moon's surface. Cade held her in his arms. She was weak, eyes half open. "You did it," he whispered. "You scared them off." Varela tried to smile. "I didn't mean to go that far. I thought I was going to lose myself." "You didn't," he said. "You're still here." Then the ground shook. A deep sound echoed from the cracks in the moon rock, like a heartbeat. Then came a voice, not from the air, not from any speaker, but inside Varela's mind. "Daughter of Frost, child of the Queen, you have awakened." The last key. Her eyes opened wide. "Did you hear that?" she asked. Cade shook his head. "Hear what?" Before she could answer, the ground split open behind them. A massive shape rose from the depths, a structure hidden beneath the surface. It was made of crystal and steel, shaped like a temple, glowing with ancient blue light. Symbols shined across its walls. It looked both alien and familiar, the core. "It's calling to me," Varela whispered. She stood slowly, her strength returning. The light of the temple reflected in her eyes. Cade grabbed her hand. "Wait, it could be dangerous." "I know," she said. "But this is what my mother was preparing me for. This is what she feared, and what she hoped I'd survive." Together, they walked into the ancient temple. Inside, the air was cold, but calm. Walls shimmered with glowing frost, and at the center stood a crystal throne. Hovering above it was a strange object, a frozen sphere, swirling with light and dark energy. Varela stepped closer. "This is the true frost core, the one hidden long ago." A figure appeared beside the throne, holographic, female, elegant. It looked like the first queen of Zorelia, long dead. She smiled softly. "You have awakened the legacy. The core cannot be held by greed, only by balance. You were born not just to carry it, but to choose what it becomes." Cade stepped forward. "What does she mean?" Varela looked at him. "I can use this power to rebuild or destroy. That's the final truth." She raised her hand. The sphere floated toward her as it touched her skin. Her body glowed. But this time she didn't tremble. She didn't fall. She stood taller. The storm inside her became calm. Visions filled her mind of her mother as a young woman, hiding the core deep underground, of the wars that nearly wiped out their people, and of a future still unwritten. She turned back to Cade. "This power could make me queen of 1,000 systems," she said. "But that's not what I want." He looked at her. "Then what do you want?" "I want to heal what's broken. To protect people like me, the forgotten ones, the soft ones, the ones who don't fit in their world." He smiled. "That's a better queen than your planet ever had." She stepped down from the platform and took his hand. "I don't want to rule alone," she said quietly. Cade blinked. "Are you asking me to stay with you?" "No," she said. "I'm asking you to walk beside me." Above them, the moon cracked one final time, and from within, a beam of light shot into the stars. A signal, not of war, but of rebirth. Later, on a new world where ice touched green earth, the people of Zorelia began to rebuild. And beside their new queen walked a human who had never asked for power, but who had changed everything with one choice. He didn't save her because she was royal. He saved her because she was human. And in the end, the alien queen had given more than just her daughter. She had given the universe its last true hope.